And I'll just briefly introduce this. So we had three students who had a pretty unique opportunity to work with the New York Climate Exchange this semester on independent studies. And so what the New York Climate Exchange and EBRD have been doing is pulling together a playbook for green transformation for New York based on other cities around the world. So the goal of this program is to develop a playbook for the green transitions of disadvantaged communities in New York City based on the successful transitions of cities abroad. Each student team is focusing their research on a selected case study by conducting literature reviews and case analyses to identify effective and ineffective practices in line with an interdisciplinary framework. Student teams have come from Baruch, City College, Stony Brook, and Hunter College, and student teams are basing their case studies on the following EBRD Green Climate Action Plan cities, such as Warsaw, Freetown, Vancouver, Lagos, and Bogota. So each one of our three students completing these independent studies focused on a different city. And Cynthia, since you're remote, and then we'll transition into the two slide decks that are physically here, would you like to kick us off?
Sure.
Great. So if you could share your screen, and I just want to make sure we can see you.
Let's see. Can you see it in slideshow view?
Yes, all good. Take it away.
Perfect. Whoops. Wait a minute. I don't want to be there yet. Oh no, it's automatic. I don't know how. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cynthia Avila Fadash, and I'll be discussing financing urban reforestation and providing insights from Freetown, the tree town. All right, so this is an image of a portion of Freetown, Sierra Leone. It's located in a peninsula in West Africa. In this photo, we can see the hills, we can see the trees, also quite a bit of dirt and asphalt. Um, this image is certainly not representative of all of Freetown, but it does a good job in showing the reasons why the campaign Freetown, the Tree Town, was created. Whoops. All right. So here's some background on Freetown. It is the capital of Sierra Leone and has the largest urban hub in the country with around 1.3 to 1.4 million people. It was founded in 1787 as a home for freed slaves and sits between the Atlantic Ocean and the Lion Mountains, with forested hills dropping into coastal swamps and beaches. It's in a really nice location. However, with the city's fast population growth, the demand for housing materials and charcoal for cooking increases, and this is really what's putting pressure and causing deforestation. And outward growth has produced a more dispersed, disconnected city. So it has more limited infrastructure, mismanaged road space, and insufficient reliable public transportation. So this, like I said, puts significant pressure on the environment and increases the chances of landslides, of flooding, coastal erosion, and of course, the loss of important plants and animal species. Before we discuss the Freetown, the Tree Town campaign, I wanted to go over Transform Freetown, which acts as an overarching framework for the city of Freetown. So, Transform Freetown's an initiative by the mayor and the city council to identify priorities that the city wants to focus on. And to develop these priorities, they started by conducting 310 meetings in the 310 zones that make up Freetown. 500 trained facilitators conducted these meetings, and it was to gather needs assessment feedback. And in that needs assessment, they sought to provide answers for where the town is failing in delivering services to the community and what are the priorities of the residents. Attendees of these meetings were mixed. It included residents, community-based organizations, representatives from government, private sectors, etc. And then, in addition to these meetings, they held one-on-one meetings, they had community walkabouts, open door policy. They created a website at this time as well and a Facebook page. They really went above and beyond trying to include as many voices as they could in these assessments. So once they got the data from these zone meetings, they moved it along to the ward level. Freetown has 48 wards, and they created ward development committees. And what they were tasked with was pulling out the priorities that were mentioned in these needs assessments, and then agreeing upon what the main one should be. So what they developed or what they agreed upon was the priorities are resilience, human development, healthy city, and urban mobility. And then from the ward level, they move these priorities over to working groups. And the working groups, the composition of them is similar to those, the composition of the at the zone level. So people from different sectors. These working groups were assigned one of the four priorities, so they were divided up into four, and then they were tasked with creating priority sectors. I kind of like to think of them as sub priorities, and then developing solutions from there. So this next image, we can see that a little bit better. So you can see here, the main priorities are here on the left, and that's the work that the ward did. Then the work from the working groups is 11 priority sectors. So resilience, and under that is environmental management, urban planning and housing, revenue mobilization. The second priority is human development, and that involves education, skills development, job creation, disabilities, and with a focus on women and girls. And then healthy cities, and that involves health, water, sanitation. And then the fourth priority was urban mobility. And then we can see here on the right, the mix of stakeholders that were involved. All right, so now with Transform Freetown in place, that brings us to Freetown, the Tree Town. Before we get into how the program works, I just wanted to introduce Mayor Yvonne Aki Sawyer. It's really Mayor Aki Sawyer's drive and her relentlessness that created and pushed this program through, as as well as she helped to secure the early financing of the program. And when the program first launched, the aim was to plant 1 million trees, but that has now changed, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So, what exactly is the Tree Town program? Um, well, these are the objectives, the goals. Let's see. Oops, sorry. The objectives is communities to plant and grow 5 million trees in climate vulnerable areas. So this was the new number from 1 million to 5 million by 2028, sorry. Restore 5,000 hectares of land and sequester 100,000 tons of carbon by 2028. Create 10,000 direct green jobs, invest in nature-based solutions in climate vulnerable communities and alternatives against deforestation. As I mentioned before, this is a large part of why deforestation is happening in the area. And measure and reduce risks of climate impacts such as floods, landslides, coastal erosion, urban heat stress, air pollution, and water shortages in the most vulnerable communities and landscapes across Freetown by 2028. So this is what the program is. So what happens is the government purchases seedlings, and those seedlings for the trees go to community-based organizations. And at that point, these community-based organizations keep log of the seedlings, and they also gather growers. These growers are going to be the heart of the program, and they come from different organizations as well as just regular citizens of the town. And once a grower is identified, they are also assigned a specific area of where they can grow the tree. And so the grower comes, they pick up the seeds, they download a specific app related to this program, and they plant the seed, they water it, they take pictures, it's tagged, and then once it starts sprouting, and you can see it coming up from the ground. Photos continue, the grower continues to submit photos, but at that time it's also tokenized, is what they call it. And when it's tokenized, that means that it begins to be eligible um, to be monetized. And when that happens is, I'm sorry, what happens after that is once it can be monetized, it enters into a carbon offset marketplace and it's able to be purchased from private companies or whoever is wanting to purchase that. And then that money goes back into the program to pay the growers, to pay for maintenance or whatever else is necessary for the program. So that's how this program is circular and self-funding. And the plant locations are selected intentionally to achieve different outcomes. So, to improve fair access to trees and green space, 35% of targeted planting areas are informal settlements where canopy cover is currently limited. Planting along roads, at schools, and in residential neighborhoods, covering nearly 165 hectares so far, is intended to reduce heat stress and improve air quality. Planting in the city's water catchment and green belts, spanning about 104 hectares, is designed to strengthen water security. Planting in upper catchment zones and on steep hillsides around Freetown, totaling around 280 hectares, focuses on reducing flash flooding and landslide risk. And mangrove restoration, about 32 hectares, is aimed at lowering coastal erosion and flooding. And this is just, these are images from the app. It asks for a selfie, and you can see here it asks for photos of the plant. So it wants to see, is the plant sick? Is how is it doing? Has it really actually been planted? And it also has geotagging involved with the app as well. All right, so there's quite a bit of stakeholders involved in this program. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. As I mentioned, Mayor Aki Sawyer and then Freetown City Council are the ones that really spearheaded this program. And for initial financing, World Bank and Bloomberg Philanthropies provided some funding there. GreenScan is the tree tracker app that's used. So that's a really important portion of it. And then there's these two youth organizations, Freetown Youth for Sustainable Development and Rural Progress, as well as Youth Actions for Relentless Development Organization, Sierra Leone. These are the organizations that know the community. They have, youth involved already. And a lot of the youth in these programs are the ones that are the growers out in the field. And then we have just independent local growers, community residents, and then the private sector tokenization and carbon finance players. These are the ones that are purchasing the carbon tokens. United Nations Development Program, they are helping with personnel management. I recently saw a listing that they had on behalf of this program looking for website help designers. Environmental Foundation for Africa, they acquire the seedlings and they're monitoring the canopy, making sure that the canopy is still looking good or if they need to make adjustments or whatnot. And Catholic Relief Services has their own program called Transforming Lives Slum Upgrading Project. And so they're working with Freetown, the Tree Town, to help plant over 60,000 mangroves in the Aberdeen Creek. Okay. So there was some challenges. So one of the challenges is managing stakeholder relationships. So during the 2023 election, there was a few months between the mayor's last term and her reelection where she technically wasn't in office. And it's then when the national political shift affected the momentum and support for the project, and that led to some delays. But what the city council did to manage this challenge is they engaged the relevant ministries and agencies and they assign them clear roles and responsibilities throughout the project. And they found this effective. The approach helped to overcome bureaucratic hurdles that might otherwise prevent ministry or agency representatives from attending the coordination meetings. And another key challenge was communicating and reporting impact. So at the start, the project faced communication challenges. So the team was out there doing work and they were working very quickly, but they struggled to clearly share that out with everybody. So the mayor addressed this by hiring a communications consultant, and that did the trick. It really improved outreach and engagement. And communications have improved, but expanding into the carbon market, they find that it is requiring a broader strategy just to make sure that the community is understanding how that works. And then integrating technical expertise in project delivery. The team was strong with project delivery, but the program's technical demands required added expertise in areas like soil analysis, forestry, and data management. So, to address this, a data manager and carbon developer were hired, and then the council began training additional carbon developers. And the university partnership also helped close this skills gap, but consistent in-house technical expertise remains essential, and that's something that they are working on. And then attrition of project field staff. So they found that if there's delays or inadequate pay, that could lead to the planting and maintenance team wanting to leave and find something that's more consistent and just better paying. So, and that would obviously threaten the sustainability of the program. So the project addresses this by just making sure there's timely and adequate payments in order to retain staff. So the outcomes of this program, so far they've planted over 1 million trees, and it has a high survival rate of over 80%. And this has restored hundreds of hectares of urban forest and land. They've created over 3,000 green jobs for youth and women, providing income through planting and through monitoring of the planting. The model of selling tree tokens to corporations and institutions is innovative, and it's used to fund obviously the community growers and to create a green circular economy. And then leveraging that tree tracker app for digital tracking and monitoring, and verification of tree growth ensures transparency. So through working and engaging with local communities, they've built localized climate resilience, reduce heat, manage water, and cut pollution. So for if for other cities looking to implement a similar program, these are the key areas and key learnings to think about. So early community buy-in is key to success. We saw how transformed Freetown, all the work that they did meeting with the people, that led to not very much pushback from the community or even community partners. So we can see how that is successful for the long term of the project. Accountability mechanisms build trust and improve performance. So for this particular program, growers are accountable because they have to show proof that they've planted the seeds. They can't just take a seed and say, all right, I planted it. They have to show images. They have to show them weekly, daily, and they also are geotagged as well with that app. And there's a whole team that reviews these photos as well. Long-term success depends on people and incentives as much as seedlings. So I think that if you were to just say, hey, we're doing this initiative and the goal is, to provide more tree canopy and, here's seeds and let's plant them and let's do it for free. There would probably be quite a bit of people doing it, but they might stop. And even though there's that human benefit, it's not beneficial enough for them. So having a benefit like payment is definitely something that's helping this program be more long term. Stakeholders need clarity on benefit sharing, grievance processes, and how funds will be reinvested in maintenance and public goods. This is a really important aspect of it too. Whenever, financials are involved and you're getting paid to do something, you want to know when you're getting paid and what happens if you don't get that payment, where the money's going to from these tokens, and what this program is doing very well is they've been very transparent with their growers, and they've been very consistent with their payments and how often they're paying them. Because benefits grow over time, cities should track not just trees planted, but trees that survive and continue to provide services for years later. So um, when implementing this program elsewhere, it's not just about the number of trees that should be a data point. I think when you're looking at metrics and benefits, you also should look at the long term. So as the tree gets bigger, what is that doing? How much more tree coverage is that providing? And it's not just about the initial number. And that's it.
We will go through all three of these presentations and then take questions. So I will. So next we'll hear from Wasiu on Lagos. Let's make sure. Yep.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon this time around. The first time I came here was in the morning. So my name is Wasiu, and I'll be presenting my case study on what I call Cengage, a stakeholder engagement playbook for implementing Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan in circular waste transition. This presentation is part of my graduate studies in this program under the supervision of Professor Catherine and Kadasa Wesh from New York Climate Exchange. Basically, I just want to explore how inclusive climate governance can strengthen climate resilience in Lagos, particularly through its waste management reform. So to begin, I would just like to give us some background into the political and social context in Lagos. Lagos is in West Africa, in Nigeria specifically. It's one of the 36 states that we have in the country, and it's home to over 24 million population, which makes it one of the fastest growing cities in the world. When it comes to the population distribution, it has a lot of informal population, and some of its climate risks include flooding, heat wave, and waste challenges. Because waste problem is a big one for the state, in 2024, the state government in their Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan, also known as LCARP, decided to start some new projects. The project in focus is actually the waste to energy plant that is being proposed to be constructed in some part of the state known as Ekpe. And when we look at the plant specifically, that's page 19 of the LCAP project portfolio, part of the plan includes building 30 new transfer stations across the state, purchasing additional waste collection vehicles with the overarching goal of improving local waste removal and reducing drain blockages. Also in the plan is the idea of decommissioning old legacy dump sites to reduce environmental hazards. And this is also contained in the plan on page 19. Currently, this is what the solid waste management looks like for the state. About 13,000 metric tons of waste is generated every day. Of this volume, only 4,263 metric ton is collected, which is around 33% of the total waste generated. But in terms of what is going on the ground, the realities on the ground, there's been various announcements in media. The state is planning to do this. The state is planning to decommission legacy dump site and all of that. What I found out is that some of these things are just being announced. No concrete plan is going on the ground. For instance, the Olusegun dump site is still in operation, and it handles approximately about 2,500 tons of waste per day. The Solus dump site, which is at Igondo in Alimosho local government, is also stated for closure, but it's still active. The transfer loading station for this one is in Badagry, and when it is completed, the waste is supposed to be redirected to this area. Approximately, these two dump sites handles are 4,000 tons of waste per day. So this is the overview of the Olusegun dump site in Ojota. The size of this dump site is about roughly the size of 40,000 capacity stadium. That's how big it is. It's actually on the mainland, and a lot of communities are around these dump sites, which is a form of environmental hazard to them. But one thing I found out during the course of this independent study is that waste management is not a climate change problem. It's a stakeholder problem. And one case in point is the collapse of the Fishonscape in 2017, 2018. And I'm highlighting this case to illustrate that waste management is a stakeholder problem. During the administration of the past governor of the state, there was a plan to engage a different contractor for managing waste in the state, but it collapsed due to poor stakeholder engagement, lack of trust, and exclusion of informal waste collectors. This resulted in Lagos becoming dirtier than what it used to be because the stakeholders who are meant to be helping in making sure that the street is clean were not adequately carried along and informed in the process. So the Fishonscape contract failed. Now I'm going to walk us through the research framework I used for this independent case study. First was trying to understand the direction for the course, which is actually moving things beyond technical solutions to green projects. Now we want to deep dive into the engagement side of things. Once that was understood, I then move on to doing some background research with my focus on Lagos State to understand what exactly is missing from their current climate adaptation and resilience plan. Then after that, I reviewed literatures, I did interview, and I synthesized these findings to come up with some of what I'll be sharing in the subsequent slides. So just want to expand more on the method for this independent study. I looked at the governance structure contained in the current Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan, and it seems mostly bureaucratic to me because here we have this structure, which consists of the state's Climate Change Council, the State's Technical Committee on Climate Change Council, and Climate Change Forum. Now, the critical mass, the critical stakeholders that are involved in collecting waste in the state are mostly in the Climate Change Forum. Even though the plan documented that this forum will be used to engage all of these actors, that is not what is going on. Most of the people who are tagged as informal collectors are not part of this discussion. So that's some of the current gap in the system. Then moving on to stakeholder interviews are in November, first week of November, I conducted interview with 2 subject matter experts in the waste management sector in the state. One of them is Ms. Omo Alokwe, who is a Nigerian environmental sustainability professional and the co-founder of Street Waste Company Limited. She's been recognized for pioneering community-based recycling initiatives that empower women and youth. The second person I interviewed in the course of this research was Dr. Femi Idowu Adegoke, is the co-founder of Eco Viridis Technology Limited and the ex-president of the Lagos State Recyclers Association. So the insight I got from these 2 stakeholders is that there's strong support from the private sectors when it comes to what the state is planning to do, but there's a lot of resistance from informal waste collectors. You think of people we call cart pushers. Here in the city, we call them probably micro haulers or something like that. You know, you think of people like those cart pushers, dumpsters, and all of that. So there's a lot of resistance from them because of perceived marginalization. Again, as part of my literature review on document review, I look at what happens like global best practices, because one of the things we try to do in sustainability as well is looking at business as usual scenario and trying to move away from that into what is known as best management practices. So in the C40 cities waste to resources good practice guide, one thing the document emphasizes that transparent communications improves efficiency. When people are adequately informed and carry along in how a process is going to impact them, they are more likely to buy into that program. There's also the example of Milan in the study where integrated waste collection systems improved the outcome of that project for them. Now, putting all of these things together, I developed the influence interest grid to understand the positions of the different stakeholders currently being engaged in the Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan. But what stand out the most for me are the stakeholders in the red and the green quadrant. For the red quadrant, we have government, private sector, and international partners. These are like the big guys up there. In the green quadrant, we have the group that I call Keep Engaged. And there are so many stakeholders in this particular bucket. They include private sector participants, informal recyclers, informal collectors, youth, communities near dump sites, and NGOs, and others as represented in the quadrant. But the focus for this case study, on what I focus on rather, is the stakeholders that are in the Keep Engaged quadrant. So these are some of the gaps that identify in the current engagement strategy being used by the states. For Lagos State government, Ministry of Environment, Climate Council, and all of those people, the role they have in waste transition is policy leadership, oversight, and resource allocation. They are strong supporters for it because they are the government, and they've been, over time, they've been consistently supportive, emphasizing the need to move into a more sustainable waste management processes. But one of the key challenges with their approach is that it is very bureaucratic and there's limited grassroots inclusion. When it comes to private sector participants, they are like the logistic backbone of the old system. Sometimes they could be okay to move along with whatever the government is trying to do. Other time, there could be some form of resistance coming from them. It depends on how they are managed. So the response over time has been usually supportive, but this could change if there is perceived exclusion from whatever the government is planning to do. One of the key challenges include fear of marginalization and lack of clarity of roles. I document some of these other challenges that the stakeholders face in my full report. Now, putting all of these things together, the business as usual, the best management practices from the literatures reviewed, I proposed a framework that is called Zengage. Zengage is a 6-part framework where Z stands for zone the stakeholders by influence and interest. Now, zoning stakeholder, I think Cynthia mentioned that in her presentation when she was talking about the zonal award on something like that. So the whole idea of zoning stakeholder is that you don't just assume that because we call them stakeholders, they all have the same influence and interest. There are some stakeholders you call to roundtables to discuss sustainability solutions, but they are kind of excluded. It's just like, let's bring these guys here, but they don't have any influence to influence anything. And one thing I found out is that language is a key barrier. Nigeria is a multi-language state, different communities, different language. So if you bring someone who doesn't really understand how to flow with the language you are speaking, such a person is already excluded. So when we zone stakeholder, probably based on their level of education, what interests them and all of that, it might enable us to get more buy-in from these particular actors. Then it's also very important for us to elevate visibility of marginalized actors. Even though they are being called informal actors, most of these guys have good knowledge of how the waste management sector works, but we call them informal, maybe because of other factors. So it's important for us to also promote the feasibility for these guys, give them that recognition for the work they are doing in promoting sustainable waste management. Again, it's important to normalize their participation. It shouldn't just be like an exclusive club where they have to struggle to belong to. That participation has to be part of what we do. It's also good to generate incentive for inclusion, as in the case of the Freetown that Cynthia spoke about. When you tokenize, when you incentivize some of these activities, you kind of put in that kind of a system that makes it encouraging for people to be part of it. And then it's also okay to have a policy that supports the engagement process, such that when there's change in government, you can be sure of continuity in what has been built. And the data side of things is important for accountability. It might be difficult to move forward when you don't have enough data to track how things are going. And the E part of the framework is empower them to make decisions at all levels. If you found out that they have good ideas but don't know how to communicate, I think it's important to meet them at their levels, and everybody can move along that way. So with this Engage framework, this is what I expect that should happen if this is being followed, because this is just like a synthesis of best management approach when we have a government that is essentially top-down and bureaucratic. So for the high influence, high interest group, they will remain key players, but now accountable to inclusive metrics. For the low influence, high interest group, they will shift from keep informed to co-creators of whatever solutions that the state is proposing. In conclusions, I would just like to share some lessons and pathways forward. Stakeholder dynamics are decisive. Private sector support is strong, but informal workers face exclusion, highlighting the need for inclusive climate governance. There's state top-down engagement, which limits sustainability. We have these several layers of climate change, technical committee, and all of that, but grassroots participation remains weak. The proposed framework offers a path to a more equitable decision-making. And the messaging channel used must balance priorities, because there seems to be a kind of dual on different kind of message to different kind of audience. So our environmental promises for communities and the narrative for investor is like when you put your money in, there's profit for you to make from there. And accessibility and equity matter. A lot of the stakeholders are already expressing resistance to moving their waste from Lagos mainland right now to Epe, which is like suburb part of the state. It's okay to reflect deeper on such structural barriers, recognize that yes, it's far for people, and balance this with their realities. And lastly, success demands deeper metrics. Beyond participation and investment, future indicator must track waste diversion, flood reduction, and inclusion of former actors. That is the end of my presentation. I put some references here, and thank you.
We'll move right into our third city. Uh-oh. Oh, I have to stop sharing. Okay. No. Please.
No, Bogota is right here.
Is it? Oh, there it
Yes.
is. Cool. Let's go into, okay. And now, oh, no. What have I done? There we go. And it is sharing. Now Amanda will tell us about Bogota.
Hi, everyone. Hello again. It's Amanda Torres. I am going to be doing my presentation on how Bogota, one of Latin America's densest and most complex cities, successfully implemented a large-scale green mobility transformation. So I'm going to walk you through the city's interventions, governance structures, engagement strategies, environmental and social outcomes, and what lessons they offer for other cities facing similar climate and equity challenges. Oh, sorry, guys. Okay, there we go. So to understand why Bogota is such a compelling case, we need to start with its context. So Bogota has built the largest electric bus fleet in the world outside of China. This is remarkable for a middle-income city navigating financial constraints, aging infrastructure, and political fragmentation. The city faces severe air pollution, which has a direct relationship with respiratory illnesses, especially among children and seniors. So mobility reform is also a public health intervention. Rapid population growth has resulted in congestion and extremely long commute times. So these challenges disproportionately affected low-income residents who often live far from job centers. Additionally, Bogota struggles with historically low public trust in government, which complicates any major policy shift. Yet this challenge created an opportunity for proving that climate leadership can emerge from cities where governance and equity issues are still evolving. So because of all those factors, Bogota's mobility transformation is not just admirable, it's globally significant. So Bogota's mobility transition is anchored in 5 major components. So one, deployment of 1,485 plus electric buses paired with new standards for operations, maintenance, and long-term fleet management. Second, construction of electric depots and charging infrastructure that enable round-the-clock operation. Third, expansion of 600-kilometer cycling networks, which now supports everyday commuting, leisure cycling, and safe school routes. Four, pedestrian corridor redesigns, which calm traffic, widen sidewalks, and increase safety in high-risk zones. And fifth, real-time environmental dashboards, where residents can track emissions, air quality, and mobility indicators in a transparent and accessible way. So what makes Bogota's transition unique is that it bundles fleet electrification, street redesigns, and public transparency in a cohesive system. So this image shows Bogota's modal split for daily travel in 2019. So it's illustrating how residents move around the city by different transportation modes. Why this figures matter, it demonstrates that Bogota's strong reliance on public and active transport, with buses, walking, and cycling together are accounting for well over half of all trips. And then it also supports the policy argument that investments in cycling, walking, and public transit are already aligned with how residents travel and should continue to prioritize that over private cars. So a critical success factor for Bogota was its multi-layered engagement strategy, shown on this slide. So the 4 pillars are awareness, engagement, pilot participation, and adoption. So awareness campaigns helped residents understand why changes were occurring and what benefits they would see. Engagement ensured operators, drivers, businesses, residents had direct input into the design and implementation. The pilot participation allowed neighborhoods to experience corridor redesigns and before they were finalized. And adoption reflects the long-term behavior change that occurs when residents see positive results and feel that their concerns are heard and respected. So this structured engagement model helped Bogota avoid the backlash that often accompanies mobility reforms. So transparency was the backbone of Bogota's trust building strategy. So the city rolled out open dashboards that allowed anyone from journalists to students to everyday citizens monitor emissions reductions. So it also monitored fleet deployment schedules before they were implemented. So Bogota has also implemented corridor level consultations where residents could see proposed redesigns and provide feedback before those were implemented. And then equally important, the city added transparent procurement processes, which was vital in a context where mistrust of large public contracts is common. So transparency wasn't just about data, it was about signaling that climate transformation would be accountable, verifiable, and participatory. So for behavioral messaging strategy, this played a major role in shifting public perception. So rather than framing reform solely in terms of climate change, which can feel abstract, Bogota emphasized health-centered framing, cleaner air, quieter neighborhoods, better respiratory outcomes, and safer streets. So they also worked with youth climate ambassadors who became powerful messengers for sustainable mobility. Social norm campaigns celebrated transport use and reduced car dependency, creating momentum for a reinforced city goals. And then importantly, the city highlighted the immediate benefits that faster bus travel, more comfortable rides, and safer intersections, ensuring that residents felt the improvements that in their daily lives. So for Bogota's governance approach, it was highly adaptive using a cycle of pilot, feedback, redesign, and scale. So instead of locking down a design prematurely, the city tested interventions in real time. So this allowed for corrections such as modifying bus stop locations, altering lane widths, or just adjusting signaling timing. This is based on community input and data. So this iterative model allowed the city to address resistance early, refine designs based on lived experiences, avoid expensive redesigns later, and build credibility by showing responsiveness. So this stakeholder influence map breaks down which actors had high influence, high interest, or more limited involvement. So you'll see in the upper right quadrant, we see high influence, high interest, which is the Department of Mobility and the Mayor's Office, which were essential drivers in this transition. Development banks occupy the high influence but low interest quadrant, reflecting their financial power, but more limited involvement in the day-to-day operations. And then the Cyclist Association, public transport users, universities, and community organizations have high interest but lower formal influence, but they contributed essential feedback that shaped corridor designs. So this slide highlights the primary concern for each stakeholder group. So operators were uncertain about their fleet maintenance, charging cycle, long-term costs. Drivers were worried about job security and changes to work routines. Residents focused on safety, access to transit, and fairness in corridor redesigns. Youth groups just pushed strongly for climate action and accountability. And then businesses expressed concerns about parking availability, delivery access, and customer circulation. So here we see how Bogota organized the governance and financing behind the mobility transition. So at the center is the Project Coordination Unit, which is the Department of Mobility, which acted as a hub linking multiple actors, operated as maintenance teams in mayor's offices, technical consultants, universities, local community groups. Development banks such as CAF and IDB play crucial roles in structuring long-term financing for electric fleets. And this ecosystem enabled Bogota to share responsibilities in minimizing risk, build technical capacity across different institutions, and governance, financing, and community engagement all reinforced one another. So behavior change doesn't happen instantly. It moves through several stages, which is shown here. So awareness, engagement, consultation, pilot participation, adoption, and normalization. So as Bogota introduced pilots and redesigned streets, residents gradually shifted their travel behavior. Cycling did increase, ridership stabilized, and walking became safer. So this image depicts Bogota's electric bus fleet operating at a charging depot, highlighting the city's transition to zero-emission public transportation. So Bogota is combining investments in active transportation with large-scale electrification of public buses, which reduces emissions while enhancing air quality and transit reliability. So this image illustrates Bogota's sustainability strategy, which extends beyond cycling and includes mass electrification of public transit as a climate mitigation strategy. And then just a shift from diesel buses to zero local emissions, resulting in reduced noise and improved air quality, and the integration of infrastructure, policy, and operations rather than just the pilot program. So this slide summarizes some of the most important climate equity beliefs. So PM 2.5 reductions along electric bus corridors improves air quality in densely populated neighborhoods. Noise reduction created quieter, more livable areas, improved safety for low-income districts where pedestrians injuries historically concentrated, and then clear air quality indicators showed measurable progress. So environmental outcomes included lower greenhouse gas emissions, cleaner, modernized bus technology, measurable reductions in noise pollution, and transparent publicly reported progress indicators. So these environmental results make a compelling case for electrification and corridor redesigns as integrated solutions rather than isolated interventions. On the social and behavioral side, cycling rates increased significantly due to safer infrastructure. Public transport satisfaction improved, especially with quieter and more comfortable buses, electric buses. Youth engagement strengthened, shaping a generation of climate-aware civic actors. And then most notably, trust in government improves. So showing that transparency and community participation can rebuild institutional legitimacy. So these social outcomes are important as they are environmental. And on institutionally, Bogota's built structure that will last beyond a single administration. So agencies are now coordinating more effectively moving across mobility planning and environmentally. Operator relationships matured through transparent contracts and improved fleet standards as well as training. Durable financing structures enable ongoing electrification, and Bogota developed a replicable governance model other cities can adapt. So these institutional gains can ensure that mobility transition continues into the future. So this slide is just visualizes the scale of Bogota's initiative with 1,485 plus electric buses and over 580 bike lanes. So Bogota's achievement disproves the misconception that large-scale electric mobility transitions are only possible in high-income cities. So from Bogota's experience, we can draw several high-level lessons. So engagement is non-negotiable. So without public participation, even the most technically sound reforms will face resistance. Second, trust is foundational. So transparency and accountability made residents more willing to embrace change. Health framing resonates with residents. Residents respond strongly to improvements they can feel: quieter streets, cleaner air, safer travels. 4, pilot-first approaches reduce risk. So pilots allowed flexibility, low conflict, adaptation. And lastly, equity must be central. Prioritizing low-income districts not only improves outcomes, but also expanded public support. So some recommendations for other cities based on Bogota's process. These are some 5 recommendations. So begin engagement early on to incorporate community perspectives before decisions are finalized. 2, build financial literacy among operators so they understand cost structures, risk sharing, and long-term benefits. 3rd, use real-world world demonstration. So seeing a pilot in action can change public perception more effectively than reports and data can. Align climate goals with public health, so emphasizing immediate quality of life improvements, and then prioritize low-income neighborhoods where interventions can reduce inequality and build citywide support. So to conclude, Bogota demonstrates that climate leadership doesn't depend on wealth. It depends on governance, transparency, and community partnership. Technology alone cannot just drive transformation. It must be paired with public engagement, health-centered messaging, iterative governance, and an unwavering commitment to equity. So Bogota's experience shows that when communities co-author the transition climate action, it becomes not only possible, but widely embraced. Thank you so much. So if anyone has questions, feel free to ask.